Alright guys, today we are gonna be reacting to Germany's government finally collapsed. What's next? Let's jump in and see what's going on.
Video is brought to you by Ground News. Germany's coalition government has dramatically collapsed, with Chancellor Olaf Scholz firing his finance minister on Wednesday night and paving the way for a snap election early next year. So in this video, we're going to explain why the coalition was fighting yet again, why Scholz has opted for an early election, and what might happen next. Subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a reminder of how the so-called traffic light coalition came to be. Germany's last federal election, back in September of 2021, saw Olaf Scholz's Social Democratic Party, or SPD, emerge as the largest party for the first time since 2002. But to form a government with a parliamentary majority, the SPD had to look to the third place Greens and fourth place Free Democratic Party, or FDP. It took 2 months of intense negotiations before an agreement was struck, which sort of foreshadowed some of the challenges that the government would go ahead to face. Scholz, as the head of the SPD, naturally became the German Chancellor. Green co-leader Robert Habeck became Vice-Chancellor and Economic Affairs and Climate Minister, and the FDP's Christian Lindner became the Finance Minister. However, any common ground that was reached as part of the coalition agreement faded pretty quickly, and the three parties have been at loggerheads for...
What do you mean? What do you guys call... I just don't understand, like collapsing or fading, or what's going on here?
much of their term. As well as dealing with the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic, the coalition, within a matter of months of taking to office, had to face the many challenges that arose out of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The coalition's popularity has since crashed, and a recent poll for ARD showed that 85% of Germans are less satisfied or not at all satisfied with the current government. Individually, the SPD, Greens, and FDP are all polling very poorly, which we'll come on to later, and some 54% of Germans apparently favour early federal elections. Now, one of the major challenges facing the government at the moment, and causing arguments within it, is the dire state of the German economy. Germany's GDP is expected to stagnate this year, having contracted last year, and the IMF forecasts a meager 0.8%.
Okay, Germany. Damn, bro. Wow, I didn't know the hours were that big. I mean, it was getting low too. It was a little higher. I think it was 3.2. When Trump was elected, 3.2, 3.1. I don't know. But it's still, it's increasing, but it's just a high inflation. Damn, bro, Germany. What is going on here, man?
Growth for 2025, the weakest expected performance among major economies. Symptomatic of Germany's economic woes is the crisis facing the country's largest manufacturer, Volkswagen, which may have to close several production sites in its home country for the first time in its 87-year history.
Really?
Now, a key moment in the long downfall of the coalition was the November 2023 ruling by the Federal Constitutional Court that declared part of the government's budget policy unconstitutional, ultimately leaving the government some 60 billion euros short. The coalition leaders would then go on to publicly clash over how to plug the billions of euros of holes in the budget. Now, it was in this context that the most recent coalition feud erupted. Last week, an 18-page policy proposal paper from the FDP's Christian Lindner was leaked that contained his ideas to boost the economy and cut costs. Among his proposals were cuts to social spending, a moratorium on new regulations, scrapping Germany's solidarity tax, and rolling back some of the more ambitious national climate policies in favour of European ones. Now, none of this is particularly surprising for the FDP, given their free market, fiscally conservative credentials. However, these are really quite at odds with the SPD and Green positions, and therefore the leaked documents raised tensions within the coalition. In fact, many have compared the leaked paper to a 1982 letter by the then finance minister, also of the FDP, that advocated various reforms at odds with SPD policy, an event which preceded the collapse of the SPD government. It's unsurprising then that through the first half of this week, Chancellor Scholz launched into crisis talks with his coalition partners. Both Scholz and Vice-Chancellor Habeck of the Greens had warned that the coalitions should stay together. Habeck said on Monday that this is the worst time for our government to fall, given what's happening in Ukraine, with regard to the economic situation in Germany, and with regard to the American election. Habeck himself had
I just don't understand what he means, like collapse. Like Germany's government finally collapses. Like they're in a crisis. I would love to know what does that mean.
proposed his own ideas recently too, including stimulating the economy through significant investments. But Lindner dismissed this as a sign of conceptual helplessness. Ultimately, this boils down to core differences between the coalition parties. On the one side, you've got the left-leaning parties who want to allow for more spending. The SPD, for example, opposed cutting social programs, and the Greens want to invest big in green measures. And on the other side are the FDP, which demand adherence to Germany's strict budgetary and debt limits. With deadlines fast approaching for next year's federal budget, there wasn't much time for the coalition to settle this dispute. Things finally came to a head on Wednesday evening, with crisis talks obviously falling apart. Scholz then announced that he'd fired Lindner as finance minister, saying it was necessary to prevent harm to our country, and that all too often, Minister Lindner had blocked laws in an inappropriate manner. Too often, he had engaged in petty party politics tactics. Too often, he has broken my trust. Lindner had also refused to ease fiscal rules, saying that doing so would have violated his oath of office. Now, with Lindner sacked, Scholz announced that he would take...
I'm surprised how serious they take their oaths over there, man. In the United States, kind of crazy. People are supposed to have an oath to the Constitution, but man, they just don't take that stuff serious, man. So I'm even surprised he's even using that language.
A no confidence vote in his own government on January 15th, which if, as expected, he loses, would set up a snap election by the end of March, bringing the current timetable for elections forward. Now, this collapse of the coalition feels like it's been a long time coming, and the FDP's actions are effectively seen as having provoked Scholz into firing Lindner. And there is actually a political calculation here for the FDP. All three coalition parties are polling badly, but it's particularly dire for the FDP, who are hovering under the 5% threshold needed to secure any parliamentary seats, meaning that they risk a total wipeout at the next election. In the face of this existential threat, then, the FDP leadership probably saw picking fights with the coalition and ultimately leaving it as necessary to gain credit from conservatives and business-minded voters. In fact, Lindner's own policy paper we mentioned earlier has been described as reading like an election campaign program for the FDP. Scholz has justified waiting until January for the no-confidence vote by saying that he wants to spend the remaining time trying to get the most important legislation through, things like the budget and defense legislation.
Yeah, I respect that. But damn, I didn't know Germany was in such a bad spot. I didn't know that, folks. The economy is suffering a little bit, but I didn't know. I really didn't.
Which he'll reach out to opposition leader Friedrich Merz for parliamentary support on. But Merz's conservative CDU is calling on Scholz to hold an election as soon as possible, rather than delaying. Regardless, whether the election is held on Scholz's timeline or earlier, all signs point to a changing government in Germany. The CDU-CSU continues to comfortably hold first place in the polls, a position that it's held for more than 2 years, while the SPD and Greens remain in third and fourth place, behind the far-right AfD. Having ended 16 years of CDU government just 3 years ago, Scholz faces the very real prospect of becoming the latest victim of the anti-incumbent trend that's been sweeping the world. With Tuesday marking the most recent example of an electorate kicking out an incumbent party, with Kamala Harris conceding the election to Trump. A story which was covered by over 280 news outlets around the world, 37% of which lean left, while 23% lean right. The way they framed this story was different though, with right-leaning outlets tending to focus on her concession, while those on the left emphasized her insistence on continuing the fight, even post-defeat. These stories are
funny, man. That is so funny. And I know about this, right? I'm out this because I'm in Twitter all the time, right? How she was using the word fight multiple times. I think she used it more than 30 times, or something like that. 25, it was between 20 to 30. But it's just to show you how the mindset of politics depends on the side of the equation you are works. But it's very interesting how Germany is reacting to this.
Similar. The framing, well, that's very different. Now, all of this analysis is possible thanks to our sponsor, Ground News, a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers...
Yeah, I think this is his...
Trump, and Xi encourages cooperation
Yeah, I
between
think
the
that's
two
pretty much
nations.
right.
With the story often does. If you're not familiar with the media market, it's hard to know who you should trust. Bulgarian one. Okay, the latter does
Yeah,
sound
very
less
interesting. Very interesting. I didn't know that this was going on, man. This is crazy. The most stupid thing about all this is that while almost nobody in Germany wants Scholz to remain in office, according to recent opinion survey, only 40% of Germans think that Merz is a good alternative, with 50% not wanting him as a chancellor either. It really sucks to be left with the choice between those two guys as the most likely candidates. We're trading harsh, strange, and a very dramatic timeline. This is so funny, man. So Angela Merkel, she leave. Uh, I think it's as chancellor, right? I think it is. And then all this stuff just happened. So that means that it probably she was not holding Germany tight correctly. Like as a leader, you're supposed to leave a position, and it's supposed to just run effectively, like just effectively. But then this all this stuff happened, so it means that this was already boiling. Damn. For the outsider, this is really quite unprecedented in German politics for chancellors to sack a finance minister and then go immediately before the press and publicly call them out pretty brutally on the reasons why it's something that has never happened before. I was actually shook. Now, the minority government is under intense pressure to call an immediate vote for confidence, and therefore, as a snap election as soon as possible in January. Constitutionally, it'll be interesting to see how this tension plays out. This is our uncharted water for Germany. God damn, man. What the hell's going on with the Western world, man? It's just like going crazy right now. There's more here too. Golly, bro. I don't know what to say, man. And I don't know how you guys. I don't know how your constitution works, right? For our constitution, it will never allow certain things like this to happen like this, right? Unless there's like a like a civil war or something like that. Even though if there's a civil war, the constitution doesn't even give the power to the president to just hold elections whenever he wants. And he still had to wait the 4 years. You know, the first Thursday after the 4 year of November. No, first Tuesday of the week of the month. First or the second Tuesday of the election year. I think it's the first Tuesday. Yeah, first Tuesday. Just to avoid all this. But this is crazy. Okay, yes. I was looking forward. Hey, shout out to the Zelda emoji thingy. Yes, I was looking forward to your video about our government. It's basically unprecedented in German history after World War II. This coalition was arguing for 3 years, was historically unpopular, and now face a historic end. A friend of mine once put it this way: the coalition is a coalition of parties with very different viewpoints. It might work in peaceful and calm times, but not in troubled times of war and stability. Yeah, that's a good point. That is such a good point. It can work only in those times where we can all be kumbaya. But when the things goes crazy, what's going on in that region of Russia, then we're talking about something different. This is, you know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear you guys' opinion. I will see you in the next one.